into it. We do have a small enough group. We'll try to get through a bunch of questions. If you all have questions, we can maybe leave a few minutes for that. And then at the very end, we will have time to do a book signing. So you are lucky enough to have not only a panelist here, but a couple more authors in the audience. I'm going to call on Alice to just introduce herself.
Oh,
Alice Seal.
okay, I'm Alice Seal with Seal Realty Advisors. Do you want me to say anything
You
else?
can keep going.
Okay. I can really keep going. We talk about, all of my listings, all of my family, but I will. I've been in the industry for a long time, and you know what? I love it. I wouldn't do anything else. This, and then just to have all these women supporting you, and it just means everything. So that's just my little thing. Thank you.
All right, we're going to start off with Tanya.
Oh, and Carla.
Oh, Carla, of course. Sorry. Carla, sorry.
She was trying to hide. She said
I
she
was
didn't.
trying to do the video.
Author.
Oh yeah, I'm one of the authors, and I'm with Alice. Like, I can't imagine doing anything else but this. I wake up every day ready to roll. So I love the support of the women that we have in the industry. It's really cool. Thank you.
And if I could, just for one quick second, I'd like us just to take one moment of silence for a friend we lost. Mollie McGuire, gone way too soon, way too young. She was real estate director for Lululemon just recently, and she passed away in the last couple of weeks. And so if we can just, quick little moment of silence and for her family. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's very nice.
now I'll tell a joke.
No.
I'm just kidding.
We could do that. But then, we're real estate gals, so we like to get things done. Tanya, you mentioned that you started in the fashion industry. How have you brought that into your own business?
Oh, look at that style.
It's
It's intimate. She can project.
Well, I like a lot of color, and if any of you all have followed any of my projects, you probably see that there is a trend with lots of pops of color. So I like to say some people love it, some people hate it, but you remember it. It makes a statement. So I started out in fashion, and just a little background, some of y'all have heard my story before, but I graduated from a very, very small Christian school. I went to a small school in southeastern Minnesota and graduated. I was one in a class of 6. There were about 60 students in my entire school, kindergarten to 12th grade. So when I went to college, I went to school at the University of Wisconsin. There were more people in a single classroom than there were in my entire school.
Yeah.
So, looking back at that, I think that really gave me a mindset of being very, very open and probably, a bit naive of what all was out there, because I didn't really know anything different, right? So I had this idea that I thought I wanted to be in fashion. I started out working at a local clothing store when I was 15, had a strong interest creatively in fashion, and I looked up what the best fashion store was in the country, and I learned of this place called Neiman Marcus. And really, I cold called them. I contacted them. I was 19 years old. Contacted them and said, "Hey, I heard you have this internship. You're in Dallas. I want to come work for you."
Wow.
And they said, "You know what? That's nice, but we're very exclusive. We've got this training program. It's full." And I ended up buying a ticket, hopping on a plane, and showing up at the HR department downtown Dallas. And they made a spot for me. And I believe that experience and that summer set me up for the rest of my life, really, I do. So, you know, I went to work for Neiman's for a couple years out of college, and, you know, ultimately transitioned to New York, to still working in fashion, but more on the financial consulting side. And around 2005, you know, I was working in New York, had sort of reached my capacity within that organization, felt like maybe I was ready to go out on my own. And similar to, you know, the Neiman Marcus story, I heard of this opportunity in Texas called the Barnett Shale. And I ended up moving to Dallas, and I'm in oil and gas.
With all that polyester, got it.
Right? So, but the natural transition, you know, learning the title, a lot of that stuff was very messy. It was very on the ground. I had a team of 5 people. We were in the trenches, and the next, you know, transition was a few months later, I get a phone call, hey, released my interest. You did what you said you were gonna do. We built a relationship, you know me, you know my family. Do you wanna buy my land? And that was 2005. And here we are today. So it seems like I'm jumping around a little bit, but I think the foundation to all that is skill sets transferable. So, you know, sometimes we get, you know, involved in a certain category of our business and we think, well, this is what I know. But skill set is transferable, whether it's creative, whether it's financial, whether it's building relationships. You know, it's applicable to a lot of different things, and I think I'm a good example of that. So
Great, well, that's a great way to start off. So Valerie, one of the recurring themes in your experience in the retail industry is the constant need for reinvention, right? And the ability to change quickly. You talked about that too. You say that being close to the relationship between the brand and the customer is critical, and I just love that phrase. With change more rapid than ever, how do you see retailers adapting to the current market, and what do you see the trends are going forward? And that was a big question, I realize.
So I spent 30 years on the retailer side, so doing real estate for retail brands. And I 100% agree with them. Skills are transferable. And the things that most really good retailers do well is they recognize when their customer needs are changing or the trends are changing, and they then adapt to it. I mean, think about the retail industry in total. Things that today we would call direct to customer, right? Target has got all these spaces out in front of them to create a transaction. So if you look at retail over time, it has invented and reinvented itself, both as an industry and as individual retailers. You know, the first open air shopping centers were in Greece and ancient Rome, where they brought the forum together and they brought people in from out of the countryside in with their goods to sell more conveniently to the customer. So then that, you know, converted into open air shopping centers that we know today, or bringing it all under one roof, department stores that we know today. So the retail community, mail order, right, in this country started in the late 1800s with the Pony Express and the stagecoaches that were going to the expansion areas in the US, and then we got the trains after that, right? So mail order today is the internet, is e-commerce. It's just taken a different form. And if you actually look at, the dollars are different, but if you look at the percentage of e-commerce sales today, it's roughly the same as the percentage of catalog sales during the peak of mail order catalog business. All right, so that's what's that about? That's about the way people shop. And it's the retailers that take that demand, that take that need and find a way to fulfill it. And sometimes it's with actual product. Look at the technology, look at everything that's happened in your lifetime. I mean, I can't, you know, in my lifetime, we were still punching cards, you know. But if you think of what's happened even in the last 10 years as far as the technology and how that has impacted retail, and what we're hearing right now all over the news about AI, and oh my goodness, you know, we're gonna have robot dogs, and you know, but it's just the constant evolution of the relationship between the products and services that the retail offers customer's needs for that particular time. So, I mean, I think that's what I would say, is that skills are transferable, that the customer needs are important, and having that connection as the retailer, as the pivot point, you know, will allow retail to stay evergreen, really.
Wow, that was fantastic. Love the percentage equal with the catalog sales. Wells Fargo wagon comes to mind.
Yeah.
Danielle, your specialty, retail, ground up development. I would love your perspective on what type of retail. There's a lot of different types of retail, restaurants, big box, grocery store anchored, etc. What potential currently, what's your view on that?
Yeah, currently the most active are restaurants, QSRs, by far. Anything with drive-through lanes, and how many drive-through lanes can you get in there, and how long can their stacking lines be? Those are the tenants that are really looking to roll out as quickly as possible. And I've even got a few strip centers where you generally have a couple of restaurants and maybe a nail salon and hair salon and some ancillary retail, and now that entire 6,000, 7,000 square foot building is restaurant, and then you get to a point where you're like, well, I don't have all the parking for the restaurant. But because of the drive-through and the pickup options that have been instilled, and I think some of this was starting before COVID, but I think COVID drove some of this as well as an important part of these businesses to get people in and out quickly, that you don't need that much parking. And so now you're going back to the city saying, well, yes, well, I have 6,000 square feet of restaurant. They don't need that much seating capacity. They don't need that much parking where they're gonna come and dine with us for 45 minutes at a time to an hour, because it's fast casual. So I see a lot of that.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, that fast casual has been a big mover. Pam, I know you have a degree in interior design, so building on Tanya's transferable skills, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you brought that into your business.
I know it. I thought I wanted to do hotel design, and so like you, I reached out to, at that time, the top hotel company, which was JW Marriott at the time, and they did offer me a position to do hotel design for a whopping, I still remember this, how many remember how much out of college your first job was? $21,000, so I think that's like $10.50 an hour. I ended up turning it down.
That's good.
I ended up turning it down, and I stayed in Omaha, where I'm from, and worked for a large shopping center. They were just starting power centers in Arizona, and so I started that. And it's how we talked about all of the different careers that you can do in commercial real estate. Our youngest son was just recently in town, and he's out in San Diego, and he's, you know, my husband, our oldest son, and I'm in commercial real estate, and he's like, Mom, I mean, I finally sat down with them and, you know, described all of the different positions. Like, all of us have a completely different position. I did large shopping center development, and then moved to Dallas and worked on the tenant side, working for Brinker, developing more than 50 Chili's from the ground up, and then found out the owners of the Chili's lease were making almost $1 million, you know, on doing that, selling that investment property. And I'm like, I could do that, you know. And so I've had my own company for 15 years, but it's been a great career. I've done everything except the one that I laid to Jan, property management, because that's
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. So I hired Jan's company to do any property management. But I just wanted to thank Tamala and ULI team for hosting this, for all of us women and the men to be here to, you know, the more we're out there and have a voice on how exciting, like Carla said, how exciting Dallas, this career has been. So we, you know, just thank you for the opportunity. And so I told my son, I'm like, here, read this book. Perfect book for you to read. 20 women, you know, because he thought commercial real estate was you just sell and lease property. He had no idea the vast, you know, all of the stuff. So it's great to have an opportunity, you know, to share career. I know Danielle, I love it that, you know, she didn't talk about it, but I have to brag about her. But she was the real estate manager for Kroger, which is a big position. And so, you know, But thank you for, having us speak today.
That's where we first met her.
Right. That's right. I have to tell how I met you.
Oh, God.
Right.
Which,
Mall manager at Valley View Mall.
back in 1999 when it was a real mall.
If we keep going like that, which I love it, we'll be here till happy
Yeah,
hour.
okay.
Yeah. Are you buying the wine? Just kidding.
Yeah, sure, why not? Maybe we can, turn it into the ULI happy hour. Thank you, Pamela, and Shelby, Alexis, and Shane was very helpful putting this together. Really appreciate that. Also wanna mention, Pam, who did coordinate the book. She herded a lot of cats, all our schedules. And, she's also done this before, so we had, tremendous, trust. She did a great job getting the cover done. We looked at several different design covers. They were all great, and we decided this was just kind of how we all felt back in the day. And we went with that cover.
Still do.
So, yeah, still do, it's just whatever's happened on the outside, right? So, anyway, so thank you, Pam, for just your seeing it through. I love this whole group. I mean, one of the traits of commercial women is we get it done. And I'm so proud all the time to be with what I call my peeps. And just so proud of all the work that y'all do. Okay, Jan. All right, Jan, I love it.
Yo, baby.
You started in the 80s at Century City Mall in Los Angeles. Okay, well, there's just no other type of real estate, right, that's gone through the changes that malls have. I mean, Valerie talked about the e-commerce, and boy, it's changed a lot. So I'd like Jan to give you a perspective of where she thinks they are now, because she's had such a long tenure in this sector, and what she thinks the future looks like.
Well, the future is bright, so I gotta wear shades, that's number one. And, malls are not dead. The future of malls, I'm calling it, is they have to morph. Your mama's mall is not today's mall. It, is completely different, and they have to be different. There will still be the traditional mall, that continues to be a powerhouse like a Stonebriar, but even using Stonebriar as an example in Frisco, look at how it's morphed. You know, who would have ever thought that you would have a luxury high-rise hotel? You know, who would have thought that the differences and what the changes they've had to make because of the changes in society and how we shop and the retail sector. So malls are morphing into mixed use, complete redevelopment, or a lot of malls are going to be completely not mall. I mean, they won't be a mall. So some of the local developments that are morphing, like Centennial has taken on Willow Bend in Plano, and that poor property is gorgeous, and it has tried to do so many different things. And finally, the right thing is being done, where there is gonna be office, there is gonna be hotel, they're turning the outfit inside out. I mean, things like that, same with Collin Creek Mall. So in my opinion, the future of malls, and I think we need to come up with a different name than mall, because malls are just not what they used to be. So I'll come up with a name and I'll let you know, and I'll trademark it.
Let us know, we'll put it in our documents.
Yes, and so, yeah, we'll love that, change another lease. And so, that's really what I see is the morphing of it. And quite frankly, from a consumer standpoint, I like it, the fact that there is so much change. I was fortunate to actually de-mall. ULI actually did a case study on it. Anaheim Plaza in California was the first de-malling in America. And I was the general manager and worked with the redevelopment department for the city of Anaheim to get that done. And we tore down the mall except for Mervyn's. We tore down all the department stores, the shops and everything. And we developed the first Walmart in Orange County. And so it became completely outdoor, completely morphed. And another thing that has always bothered me, because, you know, when you travel, we go shop because of course we have to see the competition. And,
Is that the only reason?
Yeah, well, wink, wink. And, I called the malls, they were all being homogenized. every mall that you would go to, you know that you were gonna get the same tenants. So if you're in a mall in Indianapolis and you're a mall in Florida and a mall in Texas, you're gonna get the Gap, you're gonna get this, they were just homogenized, and to me, they became completely boring. And the only difference is whether or not they had a carousel, if their restrooms were clean, and, things like that. So, yay, homogenization is out the window. There's all new concepts, all new landlords that have had to morph, and so bring the morphing on.
Right, more fun.
There you are.
Yeah, I love that, and that goes right into, we're gonna stay with you.
Oh,
The
God.
next question, morphing goes perfectly, because you mentioned in the book a lot about flexibility. So one of the questions in the book was about essential skills, flexibility, accepting change. So could you share some techniques or kind of how to get that mindset that's really helped you? I've sensed some of it's humor, we might have.
Yeah, well, if you don't have a sense of humor in this business, you're not gonna make it. That's number one, because you will, either be a drug addict, a walking alcoholic, or just decide you don't wanna be here anymore. So that's not an option. But, so for me, the biggest thing that I've learned through the years and what I have instilled in my 27-year-old daughter is, change. Because change is everything, and change comes in many different formats. You change personally, you change professionally, you change your mind, you change your clothes, you change spouses. Well, sometimes it's good. And, so I think it's really important that we give ourselves permission to change. It's like I told my daughter where she, her freshman year at OU, she changed her major 3 times. And, people were making fun of her. They're like, well, can't you make your mind up? Well, you're not focused, you're not this. And she's like, no, I've learned through my mom that, you bob and weave and you do whatever you think is right at the time. And don't apologize for it, own it. Change is good. So, the best way to do it is just keep an open mind, give yourself permission, and for God's sakes, change.
Awesome.
Change.
Awesome. Pam, we'll go to you next. There's a question in the book, all the authors were asked about mentors, and I was really fascinated with one of the mentors that Pam mentioned, Dan Lem, and so I love it, even though this is in the book, but you gotta hear it from the source, because this is really good, and I'd like her to explain the salt timer technique, and then asking about feeling rather than thinking, because I'm too much left brain, so I'm always about the thought. She's gonna share a really good nugget, and her chapter is just chock full of good stuff, as are all the chapters.
Well, thanks, Molly. But Dan Lem, we had developed a Walgreens in Tyler, Texas, and Dan was known for, at that time, finding a niche and selling every Walgreens in America. And he sold more than 130 of them in 15 years. And I know when he sold the Walgreens that we built, we paid him $140,000 commission. And so anyways, we became friends, and then I became his Texas contact. But he had a salt timer he sent to everybody. This is a smaller
Oh, she
one.
brought it. Oh, this is great.
And this is how we had to make phone calls. So we would flip it over, and we had like 3 minutes, and then once that was up, we had to go through it was called RAP, rapport, analyze, pitch. And then after that, we'd have to turn it around again, and the max was 15 minutes, because Dan always said, our time, do not waste it or give it away, because that in real estate is all that we have. And so I learned a lot from Dan. And the other thing, one of the things I still use on a lot is when we would send out, an email or a text, instead of asking, what do you think about making an offer? We always put, how do you feel about making an offer? How do you feel about going to the mall? Instead of, what do you think? Because you do not, if you're selling investment properties, you do not want them to think about too much. You want them to really, really feel it. But Dan, he was a great mentor. I actually just talked to him yesterday. We still keep in touch, but he made time a priority and had some, really good tips that I've continued. So I fully believe in mentors. I know a lot of us, I just signed up for ICSC's mentorship to be a mentor with them. Feel free to reach out to any of us that have been in the business a long time.
Yeah, such a good visual of the timer, and I know a lot of people whose timers is probably this tall.
Try turning that over.
Exactly. Need to get a smaller timer.
Well, you know, Tanya has a saying, if the deal's slow, it blows. And I'm like, that is so true.
It's so true.
And that's much more fun to say than time.
If it's slow, it blows.
Organization.
Daniel, so we're gonna go to you next. The book also had a question for all the authors about a failure and kind of what you learned from it and kind of how you dealt with it. And Danielle's was kind of special because she wrote about training for a marathon while working, while being a wife, and mother to her stepson. And so it's a great story, so y'all are gonna read and enjoy that. And she makes a great insight at the end. But when I read it, I wanted to ask why she picked that particular story at that time.
Yeah, that was a tough year for me. In fact, when I wrote that chapter, I rewrote it 3 times. I think it's the 4th version that actually got into that book. And the first time I wrote it, I was like, whew, too negative. No one wants to read that. You know, it was kind of therapeutic. And then the second one I wrote, I was like, that feels good, but no one's going to understand. But it's basically a year that I had taken on too much. I had set some goals for myself that I achieved and should have achieved, but should have achieved them a lot simpler. It shouldn't have been as hard. Anyway, so at work, I wrote some notes down so I wouldn't ramble. But I always look back on that year and think, could I have done anything different? And I always come back to the answer no. As hard as it was, mistakes that I made, I still can't see if I had made a change or done something different, would it be different? Or would I have gotten a different result, or would I have let someone else down? So I'd go back and do it all over again. I had been promoted to real estate manager for Kroger. I had received a 6-month merit raise, 6 months into that role. I was told that those never went out, that I was just totally killing it in my role, great job, everything you're doing, keep it up. So yay, extra raise. And then shortly after that, my assistant manager was incredible. He had been with the company for 46 years, so knew everything. You can lean on him for a lot. He had gone on long-term medical leave, so I had a 1-year new hire, and then was tasked to build 10 to 15 Kroger stores a year. So I was managing 21 projects at one time with one assistant, if you will, that had no training or background. So that was a lot. And then my home life, my husband had started a winery. Not only that, within a 12-month period at that time, we got engaged, got married, and opened a business. And then my son really wanted to play baseball, and he wanted to play select. He'd been playing, but And my husband never played baseball. His mom, you know, I'm a stepmom. His mom isn't really into sports, and her job wouldn't allow her to take him to practices. And with my husband's new business, he couldn't take him to practices, and so they basically said, "Hey, stepmom, if Caleb's gonna play baseball, you're gonna have to step up." So I took that on, and unfortunately, he got on a Denton team that played on the north side of Denton. So 1.5-hour drives, 3 days a week up there, coming back. I would do my training runs while he was at practice. So I was trying to, you know, multitask and do those things. I did fall asleep. I was the scorekeeper for his games. And it was a Friday. It was a makeup game Friday late night. The umpire, I guess, looked over for a final score, and there I was. That was embarrassing. I didn't even know where it was. But then my motivation for the marathon, I had found out that year, it had always been a bucket list of mine, but I had found out that year that my mom had come down with this, or had been diagnosed with this rare muscular dystrophy disease. and one that is only by genetic formation. So she had asked me, hey, do you want me to go through this genetic testing? It would tell you if you have it or not, and if this should happen to you in the future, but she lost use of her legs. And so me having already wanted to run this marathon, I'm like, that's my motivation. I'm gonna do this. As long as my legs are working today, I'm gonna use those suckers and run this race. So I put all the focus into everything for myself, for my son, helping my husband at his job, and then really just trying to keep up at my job in Kroger. And at one point I told my boss, I like bust out in song all the time in the office, and one time I told him, I'm failing. I mean, almost at the top of my lungs, I am failing, I have too much, I'm failing. He said, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. And as he's telling me, no, I'm not, he's giving me more to put on my plate.
Which is why he's telling you you're not failing.
Right. So I had a binder of books or something, and I'd slam them on the floor, and I sing that song, I'm only human. And he's like, okay, you need to go back to your office now. But that's how I felt. I mean, I truly was failing. I was missing things at work. I was starting to lose focus. I was starting to lose my short-term memory. And at this time, I didn't know that it was a function of my training for my marathon. I just thought I had so much on my plate that it's hard to remember every detail.
So, Danielle, was the takeaway from this the resilience that you gained?
Oh,
during
yeah.
that year?
Oh yeah, finding my limits. I lost my race for that year. When I felt healthy again after my race, it took me about 60 days to feel normal, to feel like I had strength, to feel like I had focus. And even my boss was like, man, you're a whole different person, like you're back. I got a 6-month raise. He gave it all back to me, but you know, that was tough. And yeah, the lesson that I learned from that was just to really understand how much you actually have going on, and
Maybe learn to say no to some things.
learn to say no.
Or later, not now, something.
I probably should have gone to see a trainer, because I knew the long hours of working and long hours of sitting at baseball games, I really needed rest.
Well,
And I couldn't schedule that, and I didn't make time for that.
I appreciate that, because you won't get all that detail in the book.
Yeah.
Valerie, I want to get on to this next question, because this is a burning question that I know a lot of us have in this industry, and they're razor's edge here, the difficult balance. You wrote in the book that you learned to be aggressive in deal making, and I really want to get your take on how did you kind of walk that line? How did you learn to be assertive while the cultural expectation is that we're supposed to play nice?
Well, first, the context. I joined Barnes & Noble when they had one store. So Barnes & Noble Superstore is what you know today, that are expanding again.
Yeah.
But grew to like 800 stores at the time. So I was on the first real estate. And aggressive for a woman is very different than aggressive for a man. And you have to recognize that, and you have to use it to your advantage. At that time with Barnes & Noble, it was very much of an Oklahoma land rush kind of experience, right? Had a brand new concept, had this superstore layout, had a partnership with Howard Schultz at Starbucks to do cafes, had a music business, had a software business within the bookstore, creating these community experiences, and trying to convince landlords and property owners that it's a cool concept. At the time, nobody knew about it. All they knew was there'd be Daltons in the malls. So there was a certain amount of selling and leaning in to the product that you're pitching. So there's, in a man's world, that could very easily be seen as aggressive. You know, how I'm going to tell you about this, how I'm going to present this particular side. For me, it was more about moving quickly, getting to as many people as possible, being really well informed, not only about my brand and my concept, but about the market that we were pursuing, so that any dialogue that happened, I would be able to immediately answer with a reliable fact or something that was relevant. You know, I wasn't gonna look like the dummy in the room. So those kind of things, and yes, you can call it assertive or aggressive, and it I think really depends on who you are and how you present yourself the best, right? Something you gotta be comfortable in your own skin. If it's somebody, you know, if you got somebody yelling at you from the other end of the phone, which they did to me all the time, you know, the way I would respond would be totally different than the way my husband would respond, for example. My husband was the VP of real estate for Eckerd Drugs for 20 years. He would yell right back at him. He'd slam his hand on the table and he'd do all this stuff, you know. And I would get really quiet and talk very slowly. And my kids know if they hear that they're really in trouble. That's how they know. But it would change the temperature in the conversation. And so, is that assertive? Is that aggressive? I don't know. It's using what's comfortable for me in how do I best represent the deal that I'm trying to make. And I think it's understanding those skills that you have and translating them to the situation, and having the confidence in yourself because you're well informed, because you've done your homework, because you understand what you're trying to accomplish, and putting that in fact into the actual conversation discussion.
Okay, great. I like it. I like that part about retaining yourself. So you're kind of finding your own style. That's really great. Tanya, in the book, you mentioned follow-up. We all know this. I gotta just point out here, Pam is an expert at that. If anyone's had the pleasure or misery of dealing with her, depending on the
Other side of the deal.
Right, the
My
follow-up.
nickname's Persistent Pam.
Yeah,
so
so she has a nickname, that's what I just write to her now, dear persistent Pam. You talk about how phone calls in person are the way to go. Okay, well, new world, post-COVID, a lot of people working remotely, people are not as willing to show up in person. Kind of how do you deal with that and still, have that follow-up work for you?
Sure. Well, I love the soul timer. Love that. Talking about every minute matters and learning to manage your time. That's something that I personally struggle with because, I am a relationship person. I am very social. I get very involved with all of my projects. And I've recognized the last several years, post-COVID, what my ultimate goals are is I'm ready to scale. I want to grow my business. I want to do bigger deals, and I've got another 10 to 15 years in me to crank those suckers out. So, in order to accomplish that, I have got to be much stronger with managing some of that time and how I utilize it. And it's difficult for me. Talking about the importance of follow-up. I mentor a lot of young women, college students, do a lot with SMU. And it seems so elementary, right? Follow-up. But the reality is we live in an environment today where people don't like to use the phone. They don't like to talk on the phone. They like to abbreviate everything. They try to, if they don't have to do something in person, the preference is not to, right? We're all into this whole flexi time. I would say that in this business, if you want to do what I'm doing and sit in this chair, you got to recognize it's a different playing field. And in order for me to be successful, I have got to be in person. If I am negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal or a big transaction, that deal is not going to get done on a Zoom, on a phone, or work remote. And my advice is, in this post-COVID world, this is my personal opinion, but you're going to see a big opportunity window. Folks that are starting out in this career, 5 years from now, the people who are at the office, the people who are getting time in front of their mentors, their managers, their boss, even if it's on the elevator and it's 5 minutes. The people who are going to events and networking, and the people that are building a relationship in person, in 5 years, those people are gonna be making a lot more money, be further along in their career, and the people who are still working remote or at home are gonna be in the same position. Now, you know, I know it's not politically correct and we don't like to say all that, but I'm telling you it's the truth, because I'm the one in the position that's hiring, I'm the one in the position that's making decisions, and you know, I've got a policy in my office. If you do not come and meet with me, and it's not in person, for a lot of the things that we're working on, I don't take the meeting, because my time is so valuable. I gotta see you, I gotta talk to you, and I gotta build that relationship with you. And, you know, as far as the follow-up, you know, a perfect example is, you know, this post-COVID, with the opportunity, the playing field's been leveled. Look, there were folks that were doing deals and that were, you know, the downtown movers and shakers, whatever you wanna say. You flash forward to today, people have all got COVID brain, right? That time, it's like, who were they, what'd they look like? Today, if you're getting started in this field, or if you're already in it, there's this opportunity, you know, regardless of what's happening in the environment with the volatility and the interest rates, there is so much opportunity. The playing field's been leveled, and I really, really believe that. And we're in this fabulous place called Texas, the land of the opportunity, right? So, you know, perfect recent example, we're looking at moving our office, and we've been inquiring about various office space.
And you didn't call me, I just.
Well, y'all know the office market right now, right?
Yeah.
You cannot believe how hard it is to get somebody to call you back.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I knew it was difficult, but going through this assignment, right, Michael? Getting somebody to call you back, you know, we're looking 6 months out, we wanna be relocated. Getting people to call you back, they send you an email, but then they don't answer your questions. So I know that's a lengthy response, and a lot of this seems, you know, elementary, but I just can't hammer enough the importance of being visible and showing up, especially, you know, I had an opportunity to speak before to some of the women that are, you know, here today, some of them, you know, fairly recent in their new ventures with their own businesses, and the importance of just getting in person.
Great, and I think to add to what you said, a couple things. One is, when someone is in front of you, boy, you know, the people that need to prepare for that meeting, they prepare at a higher level. And secondly, when you're with somebody, you need that relationship that Tanya's talking about. You need a commitment from somebody. And that is just really a lot different in person than it is over Zoom or a phone call. There's just kind of that separation. You can look somebody right in the eye with you in their personal space or whatever, and you get a commitment from them. So those are really important, especially when you are making an important deal. You go back to those commitments. I mean, it's back to the handshake. It's kind of elementary, but important in this post-COVID world. So thank you for that. We're gonna just do a couple more, little bit more questions, maybe about 5 more minutes. And then you'll have time if you'd like to get your book signed by, oh my gosh, 8 authors out of 20. I don't think we've ever had this before. So what an opportunity. I don't want y'all to miss that. So we're just gonna do a couple more. I wanna go to Jan. Jan, you talked about, and this kind of goes to the relationship, you talked about growing a thick skin and not taking things too personally. Now, you know, property management, if you don't have this skill, I don't think you can do it. But how have you achieved that?
You know, I started young, and I'm a sensitive person. I'm obviously very outgoing and everything else, but I'm a total marshmallow inside, and I cry watching commercials. And I mean, seriously. I mean, you know, the Kleenex ones, just, I'm dead. So what I learned, and one of my mentors helped me with, is because the tenants will call and scream and yell, you know, my pipe's, you know, leaking. They're asking for rent relief. I mean, it's just, you know, operational nightmares. and they're not calling to wish you happy birthday. And they would be mean, I mean, just downright nasty mean, and especially when I was younger, because, you know, they just think you're a pushover, and when you're younger, at times you are. So my mentor, Mavis Northern at the time, she said, you just can't take it personal, you've gotta learn how to let it roll off you, let them have their say, realize they're not attacking you, they're attacking the situation or the problem. And so my